Thank you so much. Yeah, it's quite late. I hope there's some energy left. Is it? Okay. Amazing. So, yeah, because I think it would be great to have a bit of your engagement and energy for this talk, which is actually divided in 3 parts. And it comprises 4 people who engage in this talk. So I think in order to really cover some ground by introducing the concept of commons-based peer production and then looking into one of the core offerings of Poetic Technologies and then finalizing this contribution with a money-burning ritual, it would be amazing if we did our introduction with everyone from the team before I get started, right? So then we have like a nice narrative, a nice story for you to tell. So my name is Ela. I'm based here in Berlin. I'm a digital strategist, self-employed from the very beginning. And I have been involved and still am in many different projects around the commons, cooperativism, and digital culture. Some of them being Supermarkt Berlin. I'm also founder and board member of Platform Cooperatives. I'm a co-founder of Poetic Technologies. So this is like the main hat I'm wearing today for this presentation. It's a project that started last year and very dear to my heart. And yeah, we're gonna tell you our story, but first of all, Julio, please join me here, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ela. Hello, everyone. My name is Julio Linares. I am an economic anthropologist and also working now with Ela on Poetic Technologies. And today we also want to talk to you about what we call autonomous TEs. So I just want to have a show of hands just to know a bit about what people know about TEs. Who has heard about TEs before? Trusted execution environments. I see some hands. Okay, like half the room. Thanks. And now we have also Davey.
Davey, please.
Hi, I'm Davey. I'm software developer at Poetic Technologies, also co-founder. Yeah, I'm great code.
Very well. Thank you. Oh, how to move on here? Oh yeah, you need to expand. You want to see like full screen? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, it's all right. We can go like that. Okay. So, poetic technology, who of you has ever heard this term? For whom is this familiar? I think it's quite unfamiliar. So, it's actually, it was coined by David Graeber, and it basically says the use of rational and technical means to bring wild fantasies into reality. And it was basically Julio who proposed this title for Poetic Technologies. And what we are going to do, or what is our main goal, is to liberate the technical imagination from bureaucratic technologies. And I'm just wondering if you have ideas on what bureaucratic technologies could actually be. Are there any examples? Maybe Julio, you can give a first example.
Has anyone been familiar with German state bureaucracy, for example? So something along this line is one example, but I am sure you can think of many.
The fax machine. Okay, it's almost gone, not in Germany, but everywhere else in the world. We'll give you an insight into what we're currently working on in the second half of this talk, so you get a better sense of what Poetic Technologies is actually doing. We are a bunch of people from all walks of coding, anthropology, the arts, and finance, and we have met to work together and to sort of bring our ideas into reality. What I would like to talk about now is, as Josh had already introduced, is commons-based peer production. And this is really about finding ways of coordinating ourselves through technological means in order to co-create public goods. So why do you think it's necessary? We think it's necessary to really put the increasing decay of digital platforms to a halt. And maybe you think, well, but digital platforms, they seem to work pretty well. they function, they work on our behalf, so what's the problem with it? So if you think, or if you have doubts that platform decay is actually a thing, I would really like to advise you to look into the work of Cory Doctorow around end-shitification. Who has heard of end-shitification before? Oh yeah, some people. So basically, as this icon here says, it's basically about, it's actually as easy as it sounds, is exactly what happens when a digital platform turns into a pile of shit, not serving anymore its initial goals of providing value for the user, but basically, and I'm going to quote Cory Doctorow here, first, platforms are good to their users, then they abuse their users to make things better for their business customers, and finally, they abuse those business customers to claw back all the value for themselves. Then they die. And if you just think about examples you have recently experienced when you have been working on digital platform or when you have been exposed to specific things going on these platforms, I guess you all have examples for yourself where you realized, okay, things are not working as they should or as we want them to work for us. And this sort of end-shitification of this feeling of, okay, there are so many things that don't work for us anymore, like our friends and interests are being swapped by algorithms for content that is designed to boost engagement, or new fees are being introduced without us being prepared for it, and so on and so on. There are many examples for that. And if we look at how this plays out, not only in the digital realm, but also in the real world, if we look at the enclosure of public goods, like for instance, the housing market, how rents go up. And you can think of many other examples where resources like education, public health, etc., are becoming less accessible and actually are becoming enclosed because they're only available for a few. So looking at these developments, I would like to invite you to take a moment for yourself and think about the platforms that you have witnessed becoming end-shitified. And also thinking of how all this negative energy could have been used to build something really productive and something of collective value. And also thinking of your own struggles as a person working in tech. If you are not working in tech, it might be design or other domains, but just think about the things that you feel like you would like to change. When we talk about commons-based peer production, I would first of all like to ask you, is there anyone who feels safe to sort of define what the commons is or what a public good is? Please.
I didn't know I had to do it. So there's different definition. I was looking it up before. So public goods are things like roads or dams. But roads can turn into common goods when they become congested. So the difference between a public good and a common good usually is that a public good is always available for everyone at the same time, while common goods, there is there can be a rush on the less fish in the ocean or the less spot on the highway. That's basically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Is there anything to add, maybe? I guess profit is a really important thing here, because basically, if we look at public good, then it can be a commodity or a service that is provided without profit for all members of society. And when we look at the commons, there's even one component that comes on top, and that's the stewarding, and that's basically taking care of this resource altogether without exploiting it. I think this plays an important role. But thanks for your introduction. I think it's very accurate. So the big question is, how can we create something of collective value that cannot be compromised, that cannot be end-shitified, as we just have said before? So if things are only about individual profit, if that's the only thing, everything dies. And I think Josh showed us in his introduction that we are pretty much in this stage of capitalism where either we manage to find access to creating, unlocking this collective value, or we run into problems. So the question today is, for us, how can we learn to collaborate and to transform profit into collective value so that we build long-term solutions, relationships, and infrastructures that have the capacity to nourish our communities? And what I would like to do in this talk is to show you some examples which are not driven by profit, but which are driven by the wish of stewarding a public good together and creating livelihood and collective value for the community. And one of them being platform cooperatives. Is the basic of cooperative, is that familiar to everyone here in the room? Okay, so I can explain a little bit. A cooperative is a legal form that has been around for a really long time, I think around 250 years or so, at least here in Germany, but also everywhere in the world, basically. Cooperatives are collaboratively owned by their members, and they operate on a one member, one vote principle. So in order to engage in collective decision making, everyone who is part of a cooperative has one vote. And there's the General Assembly as the main functionality of collective decision making. And this is basically everywhere in the world, it's the same way. Now, traditionally, we know cooperatives as something that is tied to the local environment, like housing or food, etc. But with the rise of digital platforms, we have seen also an increase in platform cooperatives. And one of the examples I would like to talk about is Co-op Cycle. And they illustrate, I think, in a really great way of how platform co-ops actually work. So platform cooperatives are basically working online. They are a digital service or product, and the members organize around this product. They own it collectively, they are pooling their resources, they acquire a share of the cooperative, and that makes them a member, and then everyone can engage in collective decision making. There can be worker cooperatives, but there's also other forms of cooperative. For platform co-ops, basically what's really important to understand, they operate in the digital realm, they address a worldwide audience, they come up with a huge challenge in coordinating all these people. Even though we haven't really seen like super big platform cooperatives with a few thousand members, or I don't know, millions of members yet, but it's slowly evolving. And Co-op Cycle is a really good example because what they do is they provide a dispatching software for delivery riders, and they are present in various countries in Europe, but also beyond. So basically all the riders, all the workers have a share in the software. They control the algorithm, they know about the software, they have access to the technical tools, they are actively engaged in decision making, and also they, at least theoretically, decide about the profits and how to use it. I mean, one of the biggest problems they're currently facing is, of course, that there is not so much profit as they would like to have, but the concept itself is growing and becomes more and more interesting. And besides the very obvious advantages that a software like Co-op Cycle has, is also the fact that workers that are organized on a platform such as Co-op Cycle, this is not just about the use of the software itself, but this is really about the way how workers' rights are being safeguarded. Because they are organized as in a cooperativist manner, and I'm not saying that a co-op is the only form of how this can happen. There are several ways of introducing cooperative mindsets into existing companies, like for instance, a limited can also be organized as a cooperative with their respective bylaws. So basically, this is about creating livelihood, this is about securing workers' rights, and this is about co-owning the very heart of the company, and that is the software. So look at all the platforms that we talked about before that we feel might be enshittified. They are enshittified because they are in the hands of one single centralized power, whereas platform cooperatives strive at distributing the power among its members and users. And last point, what is also really important, a platform cooperative also tries to take into account the people that might not work for the co-op itself, but the users, people in the neighborhood, or here in that case for delivery riders. There are other people involved, such as restaurants, and even the city administration, because they all share an interest of having a local last mile delivery that is free of fossil fuels and that is sustainable and self-organized. So that's, I think, is a really interesting example. Another example, and I could name many more, but there are also other forms that I want to talk about today. There's the co-op drivers collective, drivers cooperative in the United States, and they are a driver-owned ride-hailing cooperative in New York City. And their goal, obviously, is making profit because they are out there in the market, which is, as you know, highly competitive. You all know the story of Uber and how they dominated this market. So there's a growing number of drivers cooperatives worldwide, and what they try to do is to provide exactly the same service as Uber does, but in a cooperativist manner. And they, of course, offer their services to conscious customers who want to support exactly that kind of business. And what they're really good at is they come up with the right memes, they have the right people, amazing activists working on their behalf. And I just want to encourage you to check their website and look at their storytelling, which I think is really amazing. Another model that becomes increasingly important for commons-based peer production is the workers' buyout model. Is anyone familiar with workers' buyout here? Not really, okay. You too. So basically workers' buyout is becoming more and more important these days, and it's especially for companies in crisis, or as here in Germany, companies in regions where they cannot find successors, where a company has to close because there's no one willing to either buy it or to take it over, like traditionally handing down the company from father to son or daughter. This is becoming less and less popular. So the concept of workers' buyout is basically to shift from an employee status to a co-owner status. That means employees are gathering their resources to buy the company that they have previously worked for. Now you might think, okay, this sounds like social utopia, but if you look at Lega Coop in Italy, they have managed to establish a fund that allows workers to acquire means from the state and put their own money on top to really being in a position to buy the company and to steer it together. So it's not just about co-owning, but it's really also about self-organizing around this company. And this concept is also now trying, or is gaining momentum here in Germany. There are more and more businesses that are either in crisis or that cannot find successors. So people start organizing themselves in the mode of workers' buyout. We don't have a public fund, sadly, unlike other countries, Great Britain or France. And of course also, you might know the concept of Mondragon in the Basque Country. They are really one of the front runners here in Germany or in Europe, and they have multiple examples of how workers buyout that did not just work out in a financial sense, but that really sparked innovation and also long-term that secured long-term business goals. So workers' buyout is another really interesting model. And one that also exists here in Berlin is the Community Land Trust, or Stadtbodenstiftung. And their legal form here is a foundation, but it might also be other forms. So basically what they are doing is to buy land together and to secure this land from investment spirals that, especially in a city like Berlin, is becoming more and more difficult. Of course, community land trusts, they are also, like all the other examples, they're struggling with available funds, because as you can imagine, in order to buy land in a city like Berlin, you need a lot of cash. That's not always available. So they are starting super slow. But this will be one of the big questions that we will address later. How can we accelerate this tempo when it comes to building initiatives such as the Community Land Trust? Another model that is becoming increasingly popular here in Germany is the Mietshäuser Syndikat, and you can translate it roughly to a tenant syndicate. So, and what you see here, I think, is the biggest achievement, and basically of all these projects, that you see here a really interesting way of how legal forms of organizing are being tweaked and creatively designed. And I really think that's most important to understand. I think their biggest challenge is obviously money, but that's just one challenge. The other challenge is really the question of how to organize themselves. So what they came up with is a legal form that is not rooted in our law system, let's say, but that has been evolving throughout the practice over the past decades. And the tenant syndicate put tenants in a position where they can actually buy out their own house. So it's a form of buyout, but this is a tenant's buyout and not a worker's buyout, but the mechanism, the mechanism is basically the same. Kulturland is another example, and you see also here in this little drawing, you see the complexity in the form of social coordination and organizing, and that very clearly shows that this is quite elaborate. This has been growing over years. This was not invented from someone sitting at a desk, but this is the result of a practice of self-organizing through many years. Kulturland is basically securing land for local farmers so that they can produce their vegetables and fruits on their very own land. And finally, we have our homie here in Berlin is Supercoop AG. I'm part of their advisory board as well. It's basically a supermarket that is entirely run by their members. Very interesting, 1,500 members are actively involved. Each of them is working 3 hours per month, and everyone co-owns that supermarket and has access to biological products that are cheaper than elsewhere. That's a very interesting model as well. So basically, I'm almost done and ready to hand over. The solutions are already with us. We just need to study them and understand them. So all of the examples I showed here, some of them are decades old, but they're just not widespread enough, and people know too little about them. So all these examples are commons-based. They are old/new legal forms, or let's say very creative tweakings of legal forms, and they are based on cooperativist mindset. And now the big question that I would like to hand over to Julio is basically, how can we finance these models at scale? Because, as I said before, the big problem is each of these projects evolved over a long period of time. That has to do with modes of self-organizing that are very often not available for everybody. Self-organizing is a very complex thing. I guess you all know that. Think of your own examples or situations you've had in your private or business life. Self-organizing requires a lot of skills, a lot of cultural practicing, and this is something that takes time. But we are getting better in that sector, but the big question still is, how can we finance these models at scale? Because the time window we currently have is very small, and if you want to move faster, we have to generate more funds and we have to make them publicly available. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Julio.
First of all, there is some questions maybe for Ela. Or I don't know if you have time for that, or should we just continue? Okay. So,
have time for questions?
just if there's any questions for clarification.
The difference between the Genossenschaft and the land trust?
It's basically the legal model is different. So Genossenschaft, a cooperative, is a legal form in itself, whereas the model of community land trust can take on different legal forms. Like here, it's a foundation, for instance.
Yeah.
Or it can be a mix of foundation, co-op, and whatnot.
I'll ask you more about it later.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ela.